contribute to, contribute to. Bring about, bring about. In return for, in return for. Of itself, of itself. Reach out for, reach out for. With the help of, with the help of. Consist of, consist of. Consist in, consist in. Be devoted to, be devoted to. Ahead of time, ahead of time. Be content with, be content with. Appeal to, appeal to. Ups and downs, ups and downs. May as well, may as well. Have difficulty in ing, have difficulty in ing. Mess up, mess up. Out of date, out of date. In practice, in practice. Just around the corner, just around the corner. Have nothing to do with, have nothing to do with. Can afford to do, can afford to do. A range of, a range of. Interfere with, interfere with. Interact with, interact with. Be willing to do, be willing to do. So to speak, so to speak. Have no choice but to do, have no choice but to do. Starve to death, starve to death. Take a measure, take a measure. Prive of be, prive of be. Set foot on, set foot on. For ages, for ages. No longer, no longer. Supply A with B, supply A with B. Come upon, come upon. Make a fortune, make a fortune. Up to date, up to date. Be suitable for, be suitable for. In one's shoes, in one's shoes. Be divided into, be divided into. Inform A of B, inform A of B. More or less, more or less. Cope with, cope with. In that, in that. Catch one's eye, catch one's eye. Fall apart, fall apart. From then on, from then on. In question, in question. Depart from, depart from. On business, on business. Dispense with, dispense with. At large, at large. Run for, run for. As a consequence, as a consequence. No wonder, no wonder. Make up for, make up for. Make up with, make up with. Of no use, of no use. Out of reach, out of reach. Be characterized by, be characterized by. Be composed of. Be composed of. By nature. By nature. Cannot help but do. Cannot help but do. In haste. In haste. Do without. Do without. In place of. In place of. Translate A into B. Translate A into B. Act on. Act on. Date back to. Date back to. Be overwhelmed with. Be overwhelmed with. Of late. Of late. Inferior to. Inferior to. Collide with. Collide with. Point of view. Point of view. Set in. Set in. Be dependent on. Be dependent on. At will. At will. In the meantime. In the meantime. Stand up to. Stand up to. Stand up for. Stand up for. Be exposed to. Be exposed to. May well. May well. Call on. Call on. Be busy ing. Be busy ing. To some degree. To some degree. Weed out. Weed out. Be correlated with. Be correlated with. Chances are. Chances are. Persist in. Persist in. Be bound to do. Be bound to do. Be bound for. Be bound for. In a flash. In a flash. Comply with. Comply with. Burst into. Burst into. To one's surprise. To one's surprise. Back off. Back off. Put to use. Put to use. At a glance. At a glance. By comparison. By comparison. Make it a rule to do. Make it a rule to do. Attribute A to B. Attribute A to B. In the face of. In the face of. Attend to. Attend to. Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. Pass up. Pass up. Clear A of B. Clear A of B. Live up to. Live up to. Yield to. Yield to. Call it a day. Call it a day. Be absorbed in. Be absorbed in. Bring on. Bring on. Only a few. Only a few. Quite a few. Quite a few. Lose sight of. Lose sight of. Be down to. Be down to. At any rate. At any rate. Be reluctant to do. Be reluctant to do. Now that. Now that. Aside from. Aside from. It is no use ing. It is no use ing. strive for, strive for. Give rise to, give rise to. Call for, call for. An army of, an army of. Be accompanied by, be accompanied by. Of necessity, of necessity. As for, as for. Be stuck in, be stuck in. Cut back on, cut back on. Enter into, enter into. Behind the wheel, behind the wheel. Go along with, go along with. Get along, get along. In excess of, in excess of. Let alone, let alone. Nothing more than, nothing more than. Trial and error, trial and error. At work, at work. Beside oneself, beside oneself. So far as be concerned, so far as be concerned. Correspond to, correspond to. Not to mention, not to mention. Be worthy of, be worthy of. In essence, in essence. Give way to, give way to. Pride oneself on, pride oneself on. Contrary to, contrary to. Inherit from, inherit from. Lose one's temper, lose one's temper. A majority of, a majority of. A minority of, a minority of. Go about, go about. Refrain from ing, refrain from ing. Resort to, resort to. Around the clock, around the clock. Be short of, be short of. Be liable to do, be liable to do. Break new ground, break new ground. Hold on to, hold on to. Substitute for be, substitute for be. Be compelled to do, be compelled to do. Keep pace with, keep pace with. Play a role, play a role. Feed on, feed on. Be typical of, be typical of. Transform into be, transform into be. On the basis of, on the basis of. Struggle with, struggle with. In distress, in distress. Let go of, let go of. Blow up, blow up. Relieve A of B, relieve A of B. Be comparable to, be comparable to. And so forth, and so forth. Come into effect, come into effect. Have a regard for, have a regard for. Be convinced of, be convinced of. At a time, at a time. At times, at times. At all times, at all times. In relation to. In relation to. In principle. In principle. Be entitled to do. Be entitled to do. Work from home. Work from home. On top of. On top of. Be dedicated to. Be dedicated to. Identify it with B. Identify it with B. Identify A as B. Identify A as B. A handful of. A handful of. Given that. Given that. Serve as. Serve as. Come to an end. Come to an end. Pros and cons. Pros and cons. Be meant to do. Be meant to do. To some extent. To some extent. Hang out. Hang out. Compensate for. Compensate for. A great deal of. A great deal of. At the moment. At the moment. Be caught in. Be caught in.